Hi, it's Jess, and today we have a short but very effective stretch sequence specifically for riders. So we're going to start with our feet slightly wider than hips. Stand tall, grow as tall as you can through the back of the neck and out the top of the head. And then from here, we're going to hinge forward from the hip. So lift the tailbone as you fold forward, and then allow the head, neck and shoulders to hang heavy down towards the mat. Take the feet wider if that feels helpful for you. And then have a little nod through the head. And just loosen off through the neck. And then take the hands over to one side and move into a twister stretch. Feel the lengthening down this side of the waist and into the hip, as well as into the hamstring on this side. A couple of deep breaths here. And then back through center and over to the other side. Lovely. And then come back to center and walk the hands through behind you to get a little bit of grip on the floor, to just increase a little bit of traction, to give you a bit of pull so that you can increase the stretch down the back and possibly also down the hamstrings as well. Let the head hang heavy. Super. And then bring the hands back. And then slowly roll back up through the spine. Okay, super. So come to the end of the mat. And from here, we're going to take one big step forward so that we can drop down into a lunge. So drop that knee down onto the mat and you can let the toes release out behind you. Sit down into this stretch. You should feel a stretch through the front of the hip here. And just allow the gravity really acting on the pelvis to increase that stretch through the front of the hip. Shoulders down away from the ears. Back of the neck stays nice and long. Then on the stretchy side, take that arm up and reach across just to increase that stretch through the hip on that side. Feel the lengthening through the side of the waist. And from there, take this top hand and bring it on the outside of the other knee. If you don't feel very stable, just take that foot out a bit so that you've got a wider base of stability from left to right. And then use that hand just to rotate into this stretch and get a bit of rotation through the spine. Keep the shoulders down, keep the back of the neck long. Keep those hips sitting down into the stretch. And then come back to center and we can set up on the other side. So hands down, swap the front foot. Drop the hips down into the stretch. Long through the back of the neck, keep the shoulders down. On the stretchy side, the hand comes up and reaches over. Increase the stretch down the side of the waist and into the hip. Couple of big deep breaths here, into the ribs on that side. And then when you're ready, bring that hand to the outside of that knee and just twist into the stretch. Keep the hips sitting down into the stretch, keep the shoulders down away from the ears. Grow tall through the back of the neck. Lovely job. Super. Come back to center. Pop the hands back down on the mat and bring the knees back into all fours. So we're going to move through a cat stretch, but with a bit of a twist, a rider's twist. So, hands under shoulders, knees under hips, shoulders down away from the ears. Inhale into the back and side of the ribs to prepare. Then exhale to scoop the abs from the knicker line up to lift up into a cat stretch. Once you get into the cat stretch, take the bum halfway towards the feet. Already you'll feel the stretch move into a larger proportion of the back. And then begin to take the hips over to one side. And then come back to center. And then curl the hips to the other side. And back to center. Just keep moving slowly and smoothly from one side to the other. Keep that cat stretch feeling. Keep the abs on. So this is a great one for us as riders. I like to think of it as moving between travers and renvers. But it's so good for us not only because it is releasing and stretching the lower back and getting more mobility into the lower back, but it's also activating the deep core muscles by keeping those abs switched on as we create that movement from one side to the other. One more pair. And back to center. And then come back up into normal cat. And release to neutral. Lovely job. Super. So now let's open up a little mobility into the hips. So it's a mobilizer rather than a stretch, this one. So staying in all fours, just lift one foot up off the mat, point the toe, and take that knee slightly further back than the stabilizing knee. And we're just going to bring the toes over to tap behind on one side, and then spin to tap the toes on the other. So just getting gentle mobility into that joint, tapping and lifting. Lovely. Let's go to 10. Keep the shoulders away from the ears. And 10. Super. And then swap to the other side. So knee slightly back, toes lift, and come over to tap and out. Tap and out. Keep the abs slightly active here to help keep the body in a nice box shape, but really focus on having soft movement through that hip and moving through the full range of motion. Lovely. And back to the starting position. Super. So let's open up through the inside of the thigh now. So come to an upward kneel. And we're going to take one leg out to the side, keeping the leg in line with the body. So trying to focus here as much as you can on keeping this hip down so that the pelvis is still upright. So just the act of not allowing the pelvis to tip over will create a feeling of stretch down the inside of this thigh. So already you should feel a bit of a stretch down the inside of the thigh there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to lift the tailbone and take the bum back as we hinge forwards. So you will feel the stretch increase down the inside of the thigh and maybe also come into the front of the hip as well. And just lift that tailbone behind you to feel the stretch down the inside of the thigh. Super, just hold here for another 10 seconds or so. Try and push the heel away if you can. will help to increase the stretch. Lovely. And then from here, come into lying on the side. So we'll do the other side in a moment. And just lie with your head on top of the arm and your knees bent. Take the top arm up to reach towards the ceiling. Now, when you're reaching towards the ceiling, from here, really consciously think of taking the shoulder blade down and in towards the spine, sort of plugging it in towards the spine. Bring the hand towards the ear, and then take the arm and reach the fingers away, stretching out behind you. So you're feeling a stretch down the front of the armpit. Reach those fingers away, 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 away. Reach as long as you can. A really great release for helping us to keep our shoulders back. Keep that lovely posture, and to undo all of the damage that we do driving, sitting using our phones, sitting using computers, all of that sort of hunchy forward stuff that we find ourselves doing. Really reach those fingers away and release. Lovely. And let's do that on the other side. So come up to the high kneel, take the leg out to the side, push the heel away if you can. Already feel a beginning of a stretch down the inside of the thigh just from trying to keep the pelvis upright. And then when you're ready, lift the tailbone and take the bum back and feel the stretch down the inside of the thigh. Push the heel away. And take a couple of deep breaths here. Now these will be especially tight if you ride in a jump saddle a lot or in a GP saddle as opposed to a dressage saddle. But tightness through these muscles can be responsible for quite a lot of discomfort in the knee. So quite often, especially if you're feeling a bit of a pull at the knee from this exercise, it shows you that you need it. Yeah, things that we feel in the knee are very rarely happening in the knee. They're happening somewhere else, and the sort of knock-on effect is affecting the knee. Super, and come back up. And let's open up this chest on this side. So lying on the upper arm, knees bent for stability. Take the top arm, reach up towards the ceiling. Plug that shoulder blade down and in towards the spine. Angle the arm towards the head, then reach it back behind you. Reach, reach, reach. Really reach those fingertips away. Feel the opening through the front of the armpit, probably also in behind the boob. Feel that shoulder blade staying plugged in, back and down behind you. Probably feel tighter on one side than the other. Very normal. Lovely job. And release. Super, and we'll finish up with a little seated stretch for the piriformis muscle, a little muscle deep in the glutes. So come to seated, and you're going to cross the legs, but without them on top of each other. So one is in front of the other. Let the knees hang as open as they comfortably can. Sit up on your seat bones, so you're actually slightly in front of the seat bones in terms of where you've got your weight. Sit up tall, long through the back of the neck, and then we're going to hinge forward, lifting the tailbone to feel a stretch deep in the glute on the side of the front leg. Just fold as far as you can. The stretch should feel quite intense. Obviously, you don't want to be stretching to a point of pain, but it will feel quite deep and intense if you're tight in there. Just fold. Different people will be able to fold further forward, based on lots of factors and not just our flexibility from a muscle point of view. It's actually to do with how our pelvis and hips are put together. Things fit together at slightly different angles for different people. So don't worry if you can't get as far forward as this, and equally if you can get much further forward and you're still feeling the stretch in the right place in the glute, that is absolutely fine. And stay here for as long as you need to for that tightness to release. So pause if you need to, and stay here for as long as you need. And when it does feel like it's released, you can walk back up, swap the legs, sit up and forward on the seat bones, nice and tall through the back of the neck, shoulders down away from the ears, and hinge forward. Feel like you've got a bit of a lift in the tailbone and that you're lengthening back out through that seat bone. Try and keep that knee soft and falling open. And just go as far forward as you need to feel that stretch deep in the seat bone. We want to feel it in the seat bone rather than in the lower back. You might feel some in the lower back, but this is really where we're getting at. So really have that feeling of lifting the tailbone and pushing this seat bone back out behind you to increase the feeling of stretch around it. And again, stay here for as long as you need to. Everybody is tighter on one side than the other, especially in these muscles. And that's why it's so useful for us to get to work on these muscles throughout riding, because when you're tighter on one side or overactive on one side in this particular muscle, it can create lots of those asymmetries that you feel in the saddle. So where you feel like your legs don't hang in quite the same way, one knee sits against the saddle more easily than the other, maybe one toe and knee stick out, or you feel like you've got more weight in one seat bone than the other. Lovely. And when it's loosened off, you can walk your hands back up.